So, I'm in my early 20s and female. I moved out on my own for the first time about 2 years ago. I haven't had much to do with any of my neighbors. I've always been slightly uneasy to the fact that no one around here is looking out for me. If anything seems off, no one would notice or do any investigating to make sure I'm alright. Last year, I noticed a man constantly walking his dog in the grass area behind my home. This isn't unusual to see. It's a common area for residents here. His dog is super cute, and my cat liked to play with it through the glass door out back. They would just chase each other back and forth and put their paws up to the glass and such. Real cute stuff. Well, one day I was outside, and his dog came running up to my porch with glee to get pets and say hi to his kitty friend. This is the first time I actually spoke to this neighbor. We'll call him Mark. So Mark seemed decent enough, and we got along just fine. We started hanging out pretty often in a short time period, because I'm a smoker and he was letting his dog out all the time. And it was summer, so we ran into each other quite often, and would spend an hour or more after work most days talking. This lasted for a couple of weeks. I gave him my phone number and was happy to have a friend in my complex. I will say, he was clearly very interested in either having a romantic relationship with me, or at least being butt buddies. He said this quite a lot. Not butt buddies, but you get what I'm saying. I was very honest with him that I wasn't interested in either at all, and had to tell him this quite often. Frankly, I was getting rather irritated that this came up several times every time we spoke. He rather quickly was trying to get me in his house. From the first time we talked until the last, he offered multiple times every time I saw him. I always said no and blamed it on me being COVID cautious. He quickly got tired of that excuse and invited himself to my home as well. I always said no. One day he came out while I was smoking with a bottle of wine and a couple of glasses, saying I had to try this stuff because it's delicious. I instantly noticed that the seal is broken, screw cap bottle, but doesn't seem like anything was drank. The bottle was filled to the brim, which I also thought was a little odd because usually wine isn't filled to the tippy top like that. So he pours a couple of glasses and doesn't drop a beat in telling me to take a drink. I felt very uncomfortable, but didn't want him to feel like he was being accused of anything when he's just trying to be a nice, friendly neighbor. After all, he poured himself a glass of this very same stuff, right? Well, my mama still raised me better than that, so I totally faked a sip and said it was good. After any sentence either of us said, he would again tell me to take a drink. I told him I don't really drink, so I'm pacing myself, but did say that I noticed he hadn't drank any, and to please go ahead. He didn't reach for his glass right away, but in the middle of speaking, he reached for his cup and knocked it over, spilling the wine into the grass. He brushed it off rather quickly and told me it's my turn to drink now. I said, but you still haven't drank anything. You spilled your drink. Pour yourself another glass. I don't want to drink alone. So he did. He still didn't drink anything. He did tell me a few moments later to drink mine. I told him that he needs to catch up, and we basically just kept doing that in circles. He reached for his glass again, and guess what? Spilled it again. Wine's all in the grass now. Then he told me to drink. At this point, I'm done. Too many red flags are screaming at me to get the hell out. I'm honest with him that this seemed really sketchy, and I didn't trust the drink because he's refusing to drink any, but is way too eager for me to drink mine. He told me he was just clumsy and taking it slow because he doesn't drink a lot, but he's seen me have friends over taking shots and drinking beers and wine, so he knows I'll handle it better than him. Yet another red flag is raised. So he's been watching me, huh? I think it's important to mention that our complex is huge. He used to work here and knows the maintenance crew, and he doesn't live particularly near me. He's about half a block away from me and cannot see my windows or yard from where he lives, and has a few different common area yards closer to him that he could use for his dog. So I told him that I'm flat out not drinking anything because of how all this seemed. He once again pours himself a glass and once again spills it. There isn't much left in the bottle at this point. I pour the remaining wine in his glass and tell him to drink with me on 3. We raise our glasses. To my amazement, he actually takes a drink, and I spilled mine into the grass. Oops. He comes out about 2 nights later while I was smoking and instantly starts complaining to me that I wouldn't date him or have sex with him, and he doesn't know why all girls are like this. He starts getting really loud, shouting at me asking what the problem with him is, that I won't do these things. I told him that I'd been honest with him since I had met him that I'm not interested in that, and that it isn't him specifically. I'm just honestly not interested in that from anyone right now. He still shouted at me and started complaining about his ex and her dog. Yes, her dog. Then proceeded to tell me that he used to abuse the shit out of that dog, and went into detail about how he wouldn't feed or water it because it used the bathroom in the house, and how he would kick it really hard. I'm horrified at this point, especially considering this whole time he's telling me this, he's playing fetch with his little dog. His dog always seems scared of him, and I'd even pointed that out in the past, and he said that his dog's previous owners were abusive, so he's just very scared and distrusting. The dog was always very excited to see me though, and would cuddle up with me and stay by me, so I always thought I was extra special. But with that knowledge, I just think the poor guy is currently in an abusive household. I was so done with this guy that I just cut him off and said I needed to go because my friends were waiting on me. He sent me several messages of gibberish when he's outside. He'll just blow my phone up with, hey, hi, jajeb, jajeb, jack, lol, my name, hi, it'll just keep going. He's texted me telling me that he knows I'm home because he's seen me walking around, that he sees my car a lot. He'll throw his dog toys on my porch, I think trying to get my attention to come out because of the cute dog. He'll just stand outside my porch for hours. It's all cold and rainy and snowy these days, so it's even creepier. I think in his mind, since I'm a smoker, I'll come out eventually. Silly him though, because I just go out front when I see him out there. He said several things to me before the wine fiasco went down that were red flags. I figured it might be a language or cultural differences though, because English is the third language he's learned, and America is the third country he's lived in. I guess moral of the story is to just trust your gut. He's still bothering me, and like I'd said, we only spoke and hung out for a few weeks in summer of 2020. My last message from him was last night. He asked me what he had done wrong, and if I felt disrespected in any way. I've not spoken to him since he screamed at me for not sleeping with him, sandwiched with admitting horrible animal abuse. I thought about answering his text with the brutal truth, about how twisted and creepy he presented himself as, and how uncomfortable he made me feel, but I didn't want to give him any ideas on how he should improve. Stay smart, folks. Don't drink things people give you if the seal is broken. He was definitely trying to drug me. To everyone telling me to move, I really appreciate the concern for my safety. I'd love to move since I've become uneasy in my own home environment, but moving is expensive and not something I can afford at the moment. I also do have a stun gun, pepper spray, and handgun. I'm extremely reluctant to ever use a gun on a person, but I do have training on the weapon. I do bring the pepper spray with me every time I go outside now, even if it's just to take garbage out or pop in my car for a second.
This happened a few years ago, but still freaks me out when I think about how differently it could have turned out. My hubs, baby, and I used to live in the not greatest apartment complex. There were 3 sections of the complex with a total of 6 apartments, 3 on top, 3 on bottom, in 2 different buildings within each section. I lived in the upper level, middle apartment on the second building in the second section. I got along with my neighbors fine. We actually all moved into our apartments within a few weeks of each other. To my left is a woman we will call Barb, in her 50s, and lives alone. Barb is a drinker and a big participant of any substances that make her feel good. Has a rotation of man friends that come and go. All fine by me. She gives me no issues, so I really don't give a fuck about what she does. But it needs to be mentioned for story purposes. I already mentioned that these weren't the best apartments. They were income-based, old, and cheap. I'm pretty sure the walls were insulated with newspaper if they had any insulation at all. So you could hear basically everything from both surrounding apartments and a lot from the units below. Only time it really became an issue is during nap time and nighttime when something would either prevent my 1-year-old from sleeping or wake him up. It didn't happen often, and when it did, I was able to go knock on the noise culprit's door and handle it with no issues. Since my child was still a baby, and I was constantly exhausted, 90% of the time his bedtime was my bedtime. Our bedrooms were on the opposite end of the apartment, from living room, kitchen, balcony, Barb's apartment. We also slept with both a noise machine and a fan to drown out any noise disturbances during the night. This particular night, though, my husband was off work and we decided to watch a movie. There was a party going on in the first building of our section. Barb was friends with the party throwers, and we could hear her in and out of her apartment door several times, as well as all the party people who were outside smoking. At some point during the movie, I fell asleep using my husband's lap as a pillow. Around 2 a.m., loud laughing from Barb's apartment wakes me up. I get up to pee and brush my teeth before coming back to kiss my husband goodnight and get in bed. Do my business and making my way back up the hall to the living room from bathroom to tell my husband goodnight. I hear knocking on Barb's door, followed with what sounds like her door exploding off its hinges and flying into the wall that separates her apartment and ours. My husband and I both say what the fuck at the same time and kind of just freeze. We hear Barb and a man talking and it sounded like normal talking. They weren't yelling or anything, so We chalk it up to Barb and her guest having a little too much fun at the party and shrug it off. I get in bed and quickly fall back asleep. No more than 10 minutes after getting into bed, I wake up to what sounds like heavy furniture being body slammed coming from Barb's apartment. Irked as fuck from the second slumber disturbance, and knowing this is going to wake my kid up, I make my way to the living room, planning to put my slippers on and knock on Barb's door, and kindly ask her to shut the fuck up. I first walk out onto my balcony to smoke a cigarette, while hoping she realizes how loud whatever the fuck she's got going on is, and fix it without being asked. The body slamming furniture only gets even louder while on the balcony, so I assume they've worked their way through her apartment and are now body slamming her bedroom furniture now. Even more irritated now, I decide Barb's too blitzed to realize how loud she's being, and I'm going to have to remind her that none of us are deaf in my apartment. So she was going to have to move her furniture fight somewhere else, or reschedule for normal furniture fighting hours, which are obviously during the day. I stand up and take a few steps towards Barb's bedroom window, where our small bucket for cigarette butts sits on the ledge of my balcony. Her bedroom window and the closest edge of my balcony to her window are only inches apart. She could easily crawl out of her window and onto my balcony, and vice versa. And that's when I hear it. Muffled screams like someone is holding a hand over her mouth, and a man's voice say in a very low voice, "If you don't shut the fuck up, I'm going to kill you, you fuckers. So you're gonna fuck me and like it." Oh fuck is my first thought. I fly inside the sliding door from my balcony and grab my phone to call 911 while telling my husband Barb is in trouble. He goes out and bangs on her door. Nobody comes, and it's locked because he tried the door handle after not being answered. I'm standing between the living room and kitchen on the phone with 911, and husband walks outside and leans over to see if he can see anything through Barb's windows. The blinds are closed, but a couple of blind slats are broken, leaving a small crack big enough for my husband to see someone lying on the floor halfway in her bedroom and halfway into her bathroom, and another person standing over them. He tells me, and I relay it to the 911 operator, while also adding, if the police aren't here soon, we're gonna bust the door down ourselves. She calmly asked me not to do anything like that, to stay on the line, and that the police were en route and would arrive soon. About 2 minutes later, we hear several pairs of boots coming up the apartment stairs to get to the second level of our apartment, and then loud pounding, knocking with, "Police department, open up!" I crack my front door to peek out and tell them we can still see two people in the back bedroom of Barb's apartment. There are 4 uniformed police officers with their guns drawn, and the one standing in my front door tells me to go back inside and lock the door. Yes, sir. I go back inside and straight right inside my balcony door to watch for anything, like Barb trying to escape the man or the man trying to escape the cops. Hear another round of police pounding at Barb's door going unanswered, and then the sound of the door being kicked in. Fire and rescues have shown up by this point, and the whole complex is lit up with lights coming from emergency vehicles. We hear a small scuffle, and then the screen door of her apartment creaks open. I look out of the peephole and see a man in handcuffs being led down the stairs, and then EMT coming up the stairs with a stretcher. A few minutes later, we hear the screen door creak open again, and I see EMT carrying a stretcher with someone in it, and open my door. Barb is unconscious and in bad shape. Her face and head are bloody and swelling, and exposed skin of her arms are already bruising. As I'm staring at her in the stretcher, going down the stairs in disbelief, the same police officer that told me to get back inside and lock my door walks out of Barb's apartment and asks if he can speak to my husband and me. I say yes and invite him inside, where he thanks us for calling 911 and tells us he has little doubt that we saved Barb's life. Asks us what we heard, and I reiterate the whole story from beginning to end as he takes notes. He thanks us again and leaves. Barb calls me about a week later from the hospital to thank me. I ask her how she is, and she tells me that she has a fractured skull and bleeding on her brain, broken cheekbone and jaw, broken ribs, and lots of bruising all over her body, but feels lucky to be alive, and thanks me again. She also tells me the man is someone she has known for several years, that he had showed up at the party right before she went home to her own apartment and was mad she didn't want to sleep with him, and even madder that she had been super flirty with the POC at the party. Several months later, The ADA prosecuting the man calls me and asks me to tell her everything from that night. So I tell her, from start to finish too. She asks me if I would be willing to testify in court, and I tell her whatever she needs to lock that animal up. A couple of weeks after that, I come home and have a summons on my door to be a witness in the case, but the court date listed is already passed. I call the ADA back and explain both worried about how me not testifying hurt the case and putting him away, and also if I had a warrant out for my arrest for not showing. She tells me that the date was wrong, but that I'm also not needed. Catch up with Barb a few weeks after that, and she tells me that my recorded call to 911 was used during court and that the guy got 15 years in prison.